My entitled brother demanded I give him my house because he thinks he deserves it more than I do, and now my family is taking his side. My relationship with my brother Alex has always been complicated. Growing up, Alex was the golden child, charming, athletic, and always the center of attention. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the one who focused on school and stayed out of trouble. Our parents doted on him, excusing his bad behavior and bailing him out whenever he messed up, which was often. I learned early on that if Alex wanted something, he usually got it. No questions asked. I managed to break away from the family drama when I went off to college, but Alex never quite found his footing. He bounced from one job to another, racking up debts and bad decisions along the way. While I was working hard to build a stable life, Alex was still living at home, relying on our parents to support him. Despite everything, I always tried to help him out when I could. I covered his rent when he got evicted, lent him money he never paid back, and even let him crash at my place when things got tough. But this time, he's crossed a line I can't ignore. About a year ago, I bought my first home. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood that I'd worked hard to afford. I was proud of it. It was a symbol of all the sacrifices I'd made, the long hours at work, and the determination to build something of my own. Alex, however, saw it differently. It started innocently enough. Alex came over one weekend to check out the new place. He walked around commenting on how nice it was and how lucky I was to have found it. But there was something in his tone that bothered me, a hint of jealousy masked as a compliment. I brushed it off, thinking he was just feeling down about his own situation. But then he started coming over more often, staying for days at a time without asking. He'd make himself at home, eating my food, leaving his stuff everywhere, and acting like he owned the place. I didn't mind at first. I figured he needed a break from his own problems. But soon, his visits turned into demands. One night, as we were sitting on the porch, Alex dropped a bombshell. "You know, I've been thinking," he said, casually sipping his beer. "I'd be way better off if I lived here. You're single, you don't have a family to worry about, and you're never home anyway. I could really use this place." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, but it never came. He was dead serious. "What are you talking about, Alex? This is my house," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I worked hard to buy this place. You can't just take it." Alex rolled his eyes like I was being unreasonable. "Come on, don't be selfish," he scoffed. "You've got a good job, no kids, no responsibilities. I'm struggling here. I've got bills, debts, and no place to go. I deserve a chance to get back on my feet, and this house would really help me do that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Alex wasn't just asking to move in temporarily. He was asking me to give him my house, as if it were his right. I tried to explain how absurd his request was, but he wouldn't listen. To him, I was just being stubborn, refusing to help my own brother in his time of need. "I'm not giving you my house," I said firmly. "If you need help, I'm willing to support you in other ways, but this isn't happening." Alex's mood shifted from entitled to enraged. "You're so selfish!" he shouted, standing up and pacing angrily. "All you care about is yourself and your stupid house. I'm your brother, and you're supposed to help me out. Do you even care about family?" The argument spiraled out of control. Alex accused me of never being there for him, of acting superior just because I had a steady job and a house. He brought up every little thing I'd ever done that he felt slighted by, twisting every act of kindness into some sort of personal attack against him. I'd never seen him like this. So angry, so bitter. After he stormed out that night, I thought it was over. But Alex wasn't done. He started telling our family that I was refusing to help him, spinning the story to make me look like the villain. My phone was flooded with calls and texts from relatives, all echoing the same sentiment. "He's your brother. How could you turn him away?" I tried to explain my side, but no one wanted to hear it. They couldn't understand why I wouldn't just let Alex live in the house if it would help him get back on his feet. They made me feel like I was the problem, like I was heartless for not caving to Alex's demands. It was exhausting. Then, things took an even uglier turn. Alex decided to escalate the situation by going to our parents. He told them that I was hoarding my good fortune and refusing to share with him, painting himself as the victim of my so-called greed. My parents, who had always favored Alex, took his side immediately. They called me up, demanding that I reconsider and do the right thing. "You don't need all that space," my mom said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Alex has nothing. He's your brother. You should be helping him, not shutting him out." It was like talking to a brick wall. No matter how much I tried to explain that Alex's request was unreasonable, that he was trying to take something I had worked so hard for, they wouldn't budge. They kept insisting that family came first, and that I needed to sacrifice for the sake of my brother. I was at my breaking point. It felt like my entire family was ganging up on me, refusing to see reason. I was angry, hurt, and frustrated, but most of all, I was done. I wasn't going to let Alex guilt-trip me into giving up my home, no matter what anyone said. Despite the mounting pressure from my family, I held my ground. I stopped answering their calls and ignored the barrage of guilt-tripping messages that flooded my inbox. I needed space to think, to remind myself why I was fighting so hard to keep what was rightfully mine. But the peace didn't last long. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, I came home to find Alex on my doorstep, his arms crossed and a smug expression on his face. "What are you doing here, Alex?" I asked, my patience already wearing thin. "I need a place to stay," he said, pushing past me without waiting for an invitation. "I got kicked out of my apartment again, and I'm not going back to Mom and Dad's. They're on my case too much, and I can't deal with it." I stood there, stunned by his audacity. He had just walked into my home, like he owned the place, like all the arguments and drama from before didn't matter. "You can't just show up here unannounced and expect to stay," I said, following him into the living room. "We've talked about this, Alex. This is my house, and I'm not giving it to you." Alex flopped down on the couch, ignoring my protests. "I'm not asking for your permission. I need a place, and this is it. You're my brother. You're supposed to help me out." It was like talking to a brick wall. Alex had convinced himself that he was entitled to my home, and nothing I said was going to change his mind. I tried to reason with him, to offer him alternatives, but he dismissed every suggestion. He didn't want to look for a new job. He didn't want to get a cheaper apartment. He just wanted to take the easy way out, and that meant using me. When I finally got him to leave that night, I thought maybe he'd take the hint and start sorting out his own mess. But I was wrong. A few days later, I came home to find him sitting on my porch again, this time with a duffel bag and a defeated look in his eyes. "Please," he said, sounding more vulnerable than I'd ever heard him. "I don't have anywhere else to go." For a brief moment, my resolve wavered. He was my brother, after all, and he was clearly struggling. But then I remembered all the times I'd bailed him out, all the sacrifices I'd made only for him to take advantage of my kindness. I couldn't keep enabling him. "I'm sorry, Alex, but you can't stay here," I said firmly. "You need to figure things out on your own. I can't keep cleaning up your messes." Alex's face twisted in anger, and he threw his bag down in frustration. "You're unbelievable," he shouted. "All I'm asking for is a little help, and you're acting like I'm trying to steal your damn house. You're pathetic." He stormed off, leaving me standing there feeling drained and defeated. I wanted to help him, but I couldn't let him take over my life just because he couldn't manage his own. I thought that would be the end of it, but Alex wasn't done causing trouble. A few days later, my parents called again, this time with an ultimatum. "You either let Alex stay with you or we're cutting you off," my dad said, his voice cold and unyielding. "We've had enough of this nonsense, and it's time you step up and help your brother. If you won't do that, then don't bother calling us for anything." I was stunned. My parents had never been particularly supportive, but to threaten to cut me off entirely? It was a new low even for them. I knew they were trying to manipulate me into giving Alex what he wanted, but I wasn't going to cave. Not this time. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "But I'm not going to be bullied into giving up my home. If that means losing you, then so be it." After that call, I went no contact with my family. It was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made, but it was the only way to protect myself from their constant pressure and manipulation. I changed my locks, blocked their numbers, and focused on rebuilding my life without the weight of their expectations dragging me down. I wish I could say that Alex learned his lesson, that he finally took responsibility for his actions and got his life together. But the truth is, he continued down the same path, burning bridges and making excuses for his failures. He moved in with some friends, bouncing from couch to couch, and occasionally reaching out to guilt me with sob stories that never seemed to change. As for my parents, they continued to side with Alex, refusing to see the reality of the situation. They blamed me for the rift in the family, accusing me of being heartless and selfish, while ignoring the fact that Alex's behavior was the root of the problem. It hurt, knowing that they would never see things from my perspective, but I had to accept that I couldn't change them. Months went by, and slowly, I started to find peace. My home became my sanctuary, a place where I didn't have to deal with the constant drama and demands of my family. I made new friends, threw myself into my work, and began to build a life that wasn't defined by my role as Alex's fixer. One day, out of the blue, I received a letter from Alex. It was scribbled on a piece of scrap paper, and the handwriting was messy, but the message was clear. He was sorry. Sorry for the way he treated me, sorry for taking me for granted, sorry for expecting me to solve all his problems. He didn't ask for money or a place to stay, just forgiveness. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive him, but it was a start. Maybe, just maybe, Alex was finally beginning to understand that he couldn't keep living the way he had been. I wrote back, telling him that I hoped he was serious about changing, and that I was willing to talk if he was ready to take responsibility for his actions. I didn't expect much to come of it, but it was a step in the right direction. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I didn't know what the future held for Alex or my family, but I knew that whatever happened, I was going to be okay. I had fought hard to reclaim my life, and no one, not Alex, not my parents, was going to take that away from me again. After the letter exchange with Alex, things remained quiet for a while. I wasn't expecting a sudden transformation from him, but his apology was a small olive branch, a sign that he was at least acknowledging his mistakes. For once, I felt like I could breathe without the constant weight of family drama hanging over me. I began to enjoy the freedom that came with having my own space, my own life, and not constantly being pulled back into Alex's chaos. But just when I thought things were starting to settle down, the peace was shattered once again. I came home one evening to find my front door slightly ajar. My heart sank. I was sure I'd locked it before I left for work. As I cautiously pushed the door open, I was greeted by a sight that made my blood boil. Alex was sitting in my living room, his feet up on my coffee table, scrolling through his phone like he owned the place. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, barely able to contain my anger. I had changed the locks, blocked his number, and done everything possible to keep my distance. How had he gotten in? Alex looked up, completely unfazed. "Oh, hey, I needed a place to crash, so I used the old key," he said, holding up a spare key that I hadn't even realized was missing. My head was spinning with a mix of rage and disbelief. He had no boundaries, no respect for anything I'd done to protect myself. "You can't just break into my house," I shouted, snatching the key from his hand. "This isn't your place, Alex. I told you, you can't stay here." Alex shrugged, as if my anger was nothing more than an overreaction. "Relax, it's just for a few nights. I've got nowhere else to go. I thought you'd be cool with it." I was far from cool with it. Alex's sense of entitlement was on full display, and it was clear he still didn't grasp the concept of boundaries. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. Alex, you need to leave. Now. This is my home, and you have no right to be here without my permission. Instead of apologizing or showing any remorse, Alex got defensive. I'm your brother. Family's supposed to help each other out. You've got this whole house to yourself, and you can't even let me crash for a few days? You're being selfish. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Alex had twisted the situation to make himself the victim, as if I was the one being unreasonable. It was the same manipulation I'd dealt with for years, and I was done falling for it. This isn't about being selfish, Alex, I said, my voice firm. It's about respect. You don't get to just barge into my life whenever you feel like it and expect me to drop everything for you. You need to start taking responsibility for yourself. But Alex wasn't interested in responsibility. He lashed out, hurling insults and blaming me for his problems. He called me every name in the book, accusing me of turning my back on family, of being ungrateful for everything our parents had done for us. It was a verbal onslaught designed to wear me down, to make me doubt myself once again. But this time, I didn't budge. I stood my ground, refusing to let his words get under my skin. I called the police, something I never thought I'd have to do with my own brother, but I was left with no choice. I needed him out of my house, and he wasn't going to leave willingly. When the officers arrived, Alex was shocked. He tried to play the victim, telling them that I was his sister, and he had nowhere else to go. But the police weren't swayed by his story. They escorted him out, warning him not to return without my permission. As they drove away, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. I never wanted things to come to this, but Alex had pushed me too far. In the weeks that followed, Alex stayed away. My parents, however, were less forgiving. They called constantly, leaving angry voicemails about how I had crossed a line by involving the police. They refused to acknowledge that Alex was in the wrong, instead blaming me for escalating the situation. It was exhausting, but I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. I had to protect myself, even if it meant cutting off the people who were supposed to be my support system. One day, while I was at work, I received an unexpected email from Alex. It was long, rambling, and full of excuses, but there was one line that stuck out to me. I just don't know how to fix my life. For the first time, it seemed like Alex was truly lost, not just angry or entitled, but genuinely unsure of how to move forward. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to think, to figure out if I could even help him without sacrificing my own well-being. I talked to a therapist who helped me see that I could care about Alex without letting him walk all over me. It was a fine line, but it was one I was determined to walk. Eventually, I replied to Alex's email. I told him that I wanted to help, but only if he was serious about making changes. I offered to help him find a job, to set up a budget, to support him in getting back on his feet. But I made it clear that this was his last chance. If he slipped back into his old habits, I was done for good. To my surprise, Alex agreed. He started attending therapy, found a part-time job, and for the first time in years, he seemed genuinely committed to turning his life around. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks, and his progress was slow, but it was something. As for my parents, they still struggled to see Alex's faults, but over time, they began to understand that I wasn't the enemy. I was just trying to protect myself, to create a life that wasn't constantly overshadowed by Alex's drama. It wasn't easy, and our relationship would never be the same, but I was learning to accept that too. In the end, I realized that standing up for myself didn't make me a bad person. It made me stronger. It allowed me to set boundaries, to protect my peace, and to finally put myself first. Alex still has a long way to go, and our relationship is far from perfect, but at least now, it's built on a foundation of honesty and respect, something we've never had before. I don't know what the future holds for my family, but I do know that whatever happens, I'll be okay. I've learned that I don't need to set myself on fire to keep others warm, and that's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. In the months following Alex's apparent turnaround, I kept my expectations low, but my hopes cautiously high. Our relationship had been damaged by years of entitlement, manipulation, and broken trust. But we were taking small steps towards something that resembled a truce. Alex was working regularly now, showing up on time, and taking more responsibility for his actions. It was a far cry from the reckless brother who used to barge into my home uninvited, and I allowed myself to feel a sliver of pride watching him finally make an effort. Our parents were still stuck in the past, occasionally sending passive-aggressive messages reminding me of how family should support each other no matter what. They still held on to their image of Alex as the one who needed constant help, and me as the stubborn sibling refusing to comply. But for the first time, I found I didn't care as much. I was learning to set boundaries with them too, only engaging when I felt strong enough to handle their disapproval without compromising my own peace of mind. One weekend, Alex called and asked if we could meet up for coffee. He sounded different, not the defensive, accusatory tone I'd grown used to, but something softer, almost grateful. I agreed, wondering what he had to say. When I arrived at the cafe, I found him sitting at a corner table looking nervous, but determined. "I wanted to thank you," he began, fidgeting with his coffee cup. "For everything. I know I messed up, a lot, and I took you for granted. I'm trying to fix things, and I just wanted you to know that." Hearing those words from Alex was surreal. I'd spent so many years believing that he would never change, that he would always be the brother who took and never gave back. But here he was, genuinely acknowledging his mistakes and trying to make amends. "I appreciate that, Alex," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I really do. But it's not just about saying sorry, it's about making sure this doesn't happen again. I want to help you, but I need to see that you're serious about this." Alex nodded, his eyes filled with a sincerity I hadn't seen in years. "I am serious. I'm done blaming everyone else for my problems. I know I've got a lot of work to do, but I'm ready to do it. I'm tired of disappointing everyone, especially you." We talked for hours, more openly than we had in a long time. Alex shared stories about his therapy sessions, his struggles to keep up with bills, and his fears of relapsing into old habits. It was clear that he was still battling his demons, but he was also fighting to become a better version of himself. And for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, Alex could finally turn his life around. Over the next few months, our relationship continued to improve. We weren't best friends, there was too much history for that, but we were rebuilding a connection based on mutual respect. Alex stayed committed to his job, even taking on extra shifts to pay off his debts, and he gradually started to regain some of the independence he'd lost over the years. As for me, I focused on maintaining my boundaries, ensuring that I didn't slip back into my old role as Alex's fixer. I helped him when I could, but I made it clear that he had to be the one driving his own progress. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I felt guilty for not doing more, but I knew that this was the only way we could move forward in a healthy way. The turning point came one evening when Alex called me out of the blue. "I got approved for an apartment," he said, his voice brimming with pride. "It's not much, but it's mine. I'm moving in next week." I couldn't help but smile. This was the first time Alex had achieved something significant on his own, without relying on me or our parents to bail him out. It was a huge step, and I made sure he knew how proud I was of him. We celebrated with a small dinner, just the two of us, and for the first time, I felt like we were both standing on equal ground. Our parents still didn't fully understand the dynamics that had led to this point, and they continued to make snide comments about how things could have been easier if I'd just given in to Alex's demands from the start. But I had made peace with their disapproval. I wasn't living my life for them, and I wasn't going to let their outdated views dictate my decisions anymore. Over time, Alex and I found a new normal. We weren't the perfect siblings, but we were learning to coexist in a way that didn't drain us both. I still kept a watchful eye, ready to step back if I saw any signs of Alex slipping into old habits. But for now, things were good. We were rebuilding the trust that had been shattered, one small step at a time. Looking back, I realized that this journey was never really about the house or the money or the demands. It was about learning to respect myself enough to say no, even when it meant facing the anger and disappointment of the people I loved. It was about setting boundaries that protected my peace, even if others didn't understand. And it was about finding the strength to hold my ground, even when the pressure felt unbearable. I still have my house, my sanctuary, and it's more than just a place to live. It's a reminder of the battles I've fought and the lessons I've learned. I fought for my right to live on my terms, and that's something no one can ever take away from me. Alex and I are still finding our way, but I'm proud of the progress we've made. We're no longer defined by the roles we were forced into as kids, the golden child and the overlooked sibling. We're just two people trying to figure out our lives, and that's enough for now. Whatever happens next, I know I'll be okay. I've learned that family doesn't always mean unconditional support or unquestioning loyalty. Sometimes it means standing up for yourself, even when it's the hardest thing in the world. And that's a lesson I'm grateful to have learned, no matter how painful it was to get there.